so let's get into it. We're going to start off with something we were just talking about, and this is the rapid news fire segment. So we're just going quick into
Pew, pew,
these.
pew, pew.
So we got Amazon focus on essentials. Sows panic. Sorry, that threw me off for a
So's
second.
panic.
Sows panic.
Comma, confusion.
Common confusion among merchants. So we talked about this. This is basically Amazon, just going one step further into the brand apocalypse.
Yeah.
Um,
So, basically what Amazon is doing is saying, because of the volume of orders we're getting, we're going to prioritize, quote, essential, end quote, items.
Yep.
So the issue there, and I think there's a one-off podcast that should be up in the next day or so on this, where we go deep, is Amazon gets to say what is essential and what is not. And so for Amazon sellers, many of which who make their living, if you're telling people that their product won't get shipped until mid-April, well, that means a couple things for that seller. That means one, that order probably doesn't happen because people want things on Amazon quick. And then two, it means that seller doesn't get the transaction money to keep their business open or pay their rent or pay their mortgage if they're running out of their house.
Yeah.
So that's the primary issue with the Amazon quote essentials.
Yeah.
It's also going to allow Amazon to play some games with the brand it sends. And I'm not saying, Amazon is going, to overtly do anything manipulative. It's just a situation that exhibits Amazon's extreme leverage they have on the supply chain right now.
Yeah.
Of all of the entities in the country, there's 3 that have the supply chains that can even come close to meeting the demands that exist, and that's Walmart, Costco, and Amazon. And Amazon's the best positioned of all.
Yeah. And then one more thing about this. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but when you go to order something now, they've kind of switched up. Remember they were doing like, get $1 if you get this like 2 days later.
Yeah.
Now they're doing like get $3 on basically Amazon product stuff. So
Yeah.
they're kind of like doubling down on trying to push that.
The Amazon owned stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the game. And we just recorded, and it should be up in the next couple of days, a podcast all about that. So if you're interested in Amazon and what they're doing, we covered that in some pretty good detail in a one-off that'll be up soon.
Yes. Okay. Second one, this is DTC brands. So direct to consumer brands are tightening up how much they spend on digital advertising.
Yeah. So
shocker.
One of the things you need to know about most DTC brands is they're venture funded or, private equity funded. And so the game they have been playing for the last 5 or 6 years is be willing to pay a lot of money to acquire a customer. So the customer acquisition cost, the CAC, they've been paying a lot of money on the expectation that that customer would have a high lifetime value, LTV. And this was all done under the rule of, growth and using that money to grow and take as much of the market as possible. But now that those equity markets and those capital markets are frozen, these companies are trying to make sure they have enough runway to survive. And so they're drastically cutting back ad spends unless it can be shown to be ROI positive off the top.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean they're going to stop all their digital spending, because certainly some of it is going to be profitable off the top. But it does mean they're going to take a look at all of their spending. Anything that isn't producing probably a immediate return on ad spend is going to get cut.
Yeah, in the article, it actually shows, it talks about 4x400, I think is how you would say the company name. But what has happened with them is they are actually a venture, they were funded by venture capitalists, and they're a company that owns multiple DTC brands. And so what's happening to them is they're taking back advertising, sometimes 50% on some products, and then some only like 20%.
Yeah.
But it's 20 to 50. I think it's 25 to 50%. They're scaling back on advertising across every brand.
Yeah, we talked about this on the last weekly episode. Is there's 2 considerations. One is your product something that is still in demand in the current situation? Will people still buy it? And then 2, can you sell it at a marginal profit?
Yeah.
If the answer is yes to both of those, go in, put your chips on the table. Never been a better time to buy digital ads. It's as cheap as it's been, since pre-digital boom days in 2014, 2015. If the answer to one of the 2 of those is no, you got to think about your strategy for navigating it if you're not marginally profitable or if your product isn't in demand.
Yeah, I just feel like some of those companies might get screwed because just depending on where you're in on these funding cycles, you could have such little cash on hand going into this part,
Yeah.
correct? I mean, like you could be going into this part with zero cash on hand, so you don't have the opportunity to even like double down on some products or I mean,
Yeah, they may have been at their, last 3 or 4 months trying to do another fundraise or in the middle
mhm,
of another fundraise,
yeah,
and that's going to be done. It's also unclear with the stimulus package how that will work for a company like that,
that's like
right? Like,
venture capital funded.
yeah,
Yeah,
so, if they weren't making significant revenue but had
right.
significant cost, like, I don't know that there's a way that any government loan or assistance saves a company like that.
I mean, we should probably talk about venture capital funding happen. Like, what do you? I mean, maybe that's for a different daily,
It's locked
but
up.
it's locked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Uh,
that's easy.
yeah, I mean, it's locked up because that venture capital funding comes from, big hedge funds and sovereign wealth funds from the most part. And, they're locked up. So that capital isn't moving. Like,
Wow.
no one's going to, raise money in the near future, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe years. Who knows?
Wow, that's I'd like to do a whole daily
Yeah.
on that too because that's super interesting because that's all we've been talking about is the risk these people are playing like this game these people are playing in that venture capital fund that funding area. So, okay. Let's move on. And these are going good. Oh, here we go. This is I think this was your favorite story. Quick news story. So, Square obtains FDIC charter to operate its own bank as an industrial loan company.
Yeah, I think this one's important because what you're seeing happen is we're going to come out of this, and tech is going to be, without question, the primary industry in the United States. A lot of other companies are going to struggle. Tech is going to not have a great year, but they're going to consolidate control over several pieces. Control might be a bad word. They're going to consolidate market presence
Mm,
in multiple pieces of the economy. So what you see with Square is Square wants to be able to lend money to small businesses, over which Square obviously has a lot of information. If you're using a Square point of sale system, Square knows what your revenues are, who your customers are, and so they're in a really good position to understand if you are in a good place for a recovery, what your sales are like, if your sales are up, if your sales are down. So I would expect to see more pushes from different Silicon Valley companies into this direct finance lending space.
yeah, and I'll read you one little small paragraph from the article that I think kind of sums it up. It says, with the ILC charter approval in 2021, Square is expected to launch Square Financial Services Inc., which will provide small business loans and deposit products to Square's customers. According to the company, Square Financial Services will be headquartered in Salt Lake City. Um, I think that's kind of sums it up, just like what they're looking to aim at
Yeah.
with these things.
Yeah, it would be your point of sale system, but also your bank.
Yeah, exactly. Fun. Okay. Next one. So, um, actually, I don't remember if we're doing a lot. I think we're just doing a short one on this. But AICP, what is AICP, Joe?
Association of Independents. I should have looked it up.
Commercial producers.
Commercial
Okay, I
producers.
didn't
Yeah.
know that either. I thought you would have known.
Um,
Calls out brands for owing hundreds of millions and late payments amid coronavirus pandemic.
yeah. So what you're seeing there, and this is going to be something that's repeated all over the industry, is in most businesses, a 30-day pay window in a professional service businesses, a 30-day net 30 is what it's called, is common.
Huh.
And a lot of very high-end um, advertising and marketing, net 60s and net 90s are actually common. And there's been some contracts that were done with consumer packaged good brands in the last year that we've read stories where they were pushing for like net 180 payment. So they would pay you 6 months after you did the work. And
Jeez.
this industry is notorious for those pay windows, and the reason why clients want to do that is because it lets them sit on cash and preserve cash flows and be able, when they report quarterly, to show big cash holdings. They haven't made the expense yet, so they're also not showing that expense. The problem now, you're going to see this in other areas of the economy, is every company is trying to save their cash because cash is the oxygen that you're going to have when the economy slows down. But it's downstream, right? If those larger companies are sitting on their invoices and not paying those smaller companies don't have the cash to pay their vendors and employees and et cetera and stay open.
Yeah.
And you're going to start to see this repeated over and over and over again, not just in marketing advertising, but in other industries. You're going to see it in construction, you'll see
Mm,
it in basically anything that isn't an immediate transaction.
mm. And
And most of the big professional services in the country, so most of the non-essential jobs
yeah.
are done on, net 30, net 60, net 90.
Yeah, and so just to give you an idea, it says brands currently owe more than $200 million in late payments to its production partners. The AICP conducted a poll, and with 500 members, 28% of the companies reported that they are owed in excess of $1 million, 23% 500,000 to a million, 16% 250 to 500,000. So that just gives you an idea
How
how much
much
these
money's out there?
brands,
Yeah.
yeah. And that, I mean, that's just cash flow too. I
And
mean,
these
they've,
aren't big companies. These are going to
yeah,
be, 10 and 20 person companies for the
yeah,
most part.
and I mean, it's definitely like a leverage thing, right? Like the brands are who have the leverage,
Yeah.
correct, right now. Yeah. I mean, what's the item that comes out of this? I mean, because I mean, most of these companies are probably going to fold if they're owed that much money,
Yeah,
and
I
this
think
continues.
one of the big lessons everybody's going to take from this is, and people learned this a little bit in 2008, but cash liquidity.
Mhm.
I mean that is the oxygen in a economically depressed or economically recessed environment.
Right.
And if you're not in a good cash position, you're going to be in trouble, and you can't predict. I mean, one of the most common things that causes businesses, so let's say you're a business and you actually do get customers, and so you figured out the getting the customers problem. One of the most common things that gets businesses in trouble beyond that is cash flow problems.
Yeah.
And the bigger the client is, the bigger the project is, the more likely you are to get in those cash flow situations.
I'm just like, I don't get it how, like, because those people have already been paid, right? So say you're one of those you're those 28% that are owed $1 million or more, right? What I mean, you've already paid your employees, you've already paid your staff, you paid for,
Maybe depends on how you structure everything.
right?
You've probably already paid your employees.
Yeah.
You may have some subcontractors
Right, who haven't been
who you
paid.
put on the same net 90 or net 30, who haven't been paid.
So they could be in that, like, the 18% that are owed, less than 250,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, that's a funky cycle.
But I mean, that's a good example of what you're
Yeah.
going to see all over the economy right now.
Yeah. And does that just go away? Like whenever they come out of this, I mean, they're still tied to their. It's just like kind of, if you survive, you get your money.
So that's the biggest question is, even in the $2 trillion stimulus
Yeah.
package, it's unclear if you can push pause on an economy and then push play again at some point in the future and everything pits back up.
Yeah.
We just don't know the answer to that. Right. And I think part of the problem is because we don't know the answer to that, that creates significant risk, which even when you push money into the economy is going to cause people to be very conservative with how they spend that money.
Right.
Right. Like we had this thing in 2008 where if you gave people money they wanted to spend, they knew
Mhm.
what they wanted to get. But we have this problem now where if you give people money, it's not clear they want to jump on a plane and go on vacation.
I see what you're saying.
It's not clear they want to go out to the mall and go
Yeah.
shopping.
Buy a house, any of those
Yeah,
things.
it's not clear
Yeah.
they want to do those
Yeah.
things. So you have, that problem. And then from the business perspective, like for these smaller businesses, there's like, oh, loans, we'll give them loans. But if you're a business owner and your business is going to be closed for an indefinite period of time, you're probably not going to take a loan,
Yeah.
especially if your business doesn't have loans, because you're not going to want to collateralize something personally if for whatever reason your business can't get back up and running.
And you're not going to take that loan and pay your past payments with it.
Because you're going to
Yeah.
be afraid of falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy,
Mhm.
which is I've been running this business, for years and it made money or it
Mhm.
was, break even, but I like doing it. Are you going to borrow $50,000 or $100,000 from the government that you personally guarantee,
Yeah.
not knowing it can take back up? And another piece of this is the longer the economy is frozen, the more, vendor buyer relationships will start to break apart. And so you'll have some, buyers that you lose over the course of the economic freeze that even once you restart, there's no guarantee they're going to come back.
Okay.
No guarantee they'll be there to come back.
Yeah, right. Okay. Let's go to my favorite article. And this is something that we actually talked about. I mean, at this time when this goes up, we talked about it yesterday. So, declining ad sales and surging usage, how Facebook will survive COVID-19. And this article, I mean, the main point I like to talk about in this article is kind of going into the staff side of it. And we talked about this right before, but they've done a bunch of good things to keep their staff around. But then and we've talked about this, but there's 30,000 employees right now at Facebook that are moderators.
Yeah.
And what they've started kind of do is they're not keeping all these moderators around. They're going to take that 30,000 down, and they're going to start focusing more on their algorithms, AI
Yep.
that moderate. And you had some
So there's a
contentions
couple
about
of
this.
important things going on here.
Yeah.
One is it is a great time to buy digital ads. We just recorded a daily on that.
Mhm.
That will be up soon, and you can listen there. Facebook ads have literally never been cheaper. 2014, 2015 was the last time we saw CPM prices as low as what we're seeing now
Mhm.
for clients that are still in. So great time, and that's the same on Google. What you're seeing Facebook doing right now, and you're seeing Google doing as well, is using Corona. There's that saying, never waste a good crisis. So rewind 3 years. The thing that the big tech companies are just getting hammered on is moderation, moderation. You can't let people post fake news. You can't let people say whatever they want, and Russians and bots and, now China. What are you going to do about it? So what those companies did is they said, well, okay, we'll hire a bunch of people to moderate. Did they want to do this? Probably not. But for those big companies, there's a silver lining in doing that, which is by doing that has the solution that you adopted. You've also basically blocked competitors from starting in that environment with you. So what I mean by this is, and you see this is why, like, TikTok isn't taking political ads, or LinkedIn doesn't take political ads, is because now the stakes of taking, say, political ads or anything on a remotely hot topic are so high that in order to do it, you have to hire 30,000 people
Yeah, right.
to police the content, right? So barrier to entry. So basically what Facebook and Google have done, and part of this is they were handed the situation by the government, is they've been handed a position of basically having a monopoly on digital political ads at the highest level. So there's Facebook, Google, and then there's some smaller network players out there that'll still run political ads. But because no startup company or even company that's marginally smaller is going to hire 20,000 people to police those ads, it's just not going to happen.
So that was their game originally of being, they wanted to be regulated because it actually
Yes.
solidified their position.
Yeah. Look, I think if they could have chosen, continue doing what was done prior to 2016, they would have continued on that path.
Yeah.
But given the option of a little bit of marginal regulation or actually some fairly heavy self-regulation, going heavy on that was the right way to go because they can afford it and it blocks out competitors effectively. So they did that. Now the problem with that is it costs a lot of money to pay 30,000
Yeah.
people. So what is the next best barrier to entry you could possibly have for that? Well, this crisis lets you, hey, we can't have these people sitting in the same office all day,
Yeah.
but we have this great proprietary AI that can police our platform for us. We'll just use the AI.
Yep.
So the AI is free. Like, it doesn't charge you hourly. It's not on contract. It doesn't have to get out to pick up kids. It never gets sick. It doesn't get bored. The AI can police everything all the time. So by swiping the in-person moderators for the AI, you still maintain this competitive barrier to entry.
Yep.
And you dramatically lower the cost of doing so.
Yep.
Because no other startup company can just build an AI that's going to detect.
Yeah.
Because you still got to train the AI with training data that can detect what Facebook and Google's AIs are going to be able
Yeah,
to
exactly.
do.
No one has that much data
Yeah.
to
Now, if you
actually
look,
train it.
the AIs are doing a mixed job at picking things out. Like, I've
Yes.
seen some things marked as like, this is untrue. That had
Mhm.
nothing to do with coronavirus.
Yep.
But this is one of the problems with coronavirus is we've turned nearly all our communications over to being mediated communications. If you can't meet face to face, your communication is de facto going to be mediated by a company or a provider or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're kind of at their whims for what gets through and what doesn't.
Right. And exactly when you put an AI in that as well.
Yeah, inject the AI.
yeah.
Hot dog, not hot dog. Silicon Valley fans.
So, and another part of this article that I think is interesting to talk about, maybe we can bring producer Nipa in on this. But is WhatsApp has actually seen a 50% increase, and so another thing they're doubling down on is protecting the infrastructure of WhatsApp right now, because a lot of people are using it to communicate. And I actually know like Nipa's was has gotten a lot of messages from WhatsApp recently. And so I think that's another interesting part, is kind of like shoring up infrastructures of these like devices that they didn't think of, these platforms they didn't weren't using as much before this crisis. Um, thought that was a fun thing. All right.
Yeah, I think the WhatsApp and look, this is why it's such a gold rush right
Mm.
now. Not really a gold rush, but why it's a gold mine right now on Facebook is usage has never been higher, but the tide of ads is pulling out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I feel like we talked about Facebook for a long time today. Okay, so let's go to our longer ones. Which one you want to start with? The Nielsen or the morning consult?
Let's start with the Nielsen.
Okay. You want to go ahead and set that up? I actually did not get a chance.
Yep. So there's some Nielsen research that was out on March 16th, so last Monday, showing how media consumption has increased from Q3 2018. Media consumption by American adults was at 10 hours 30 minutes. To Q3 2019 had risen to 11:54. No, I'm actually looking for. Give me 1 second here. So what they're basically showing is coming into the crisis, we had about 12 hours a day that we were spending on media, with 3 hours and 58 minutes of that being spent with a phone device. So what they're essentially suggesting is using that as a baseline of 11:54 2019 in normal times, and then projecting an additional 10 to 15% increase based on what we've seen during previous disasters. So they cite Hurricane Harvey, TV viewership ratings, the Snowpocalypse 2016 total television ratings, and then they show some South Korea numbers that are up 4 and 5% on TV viewing.
Yeah, I was gonna say the South Korea stuff has gone up a bunch.
Yeah. So, what they're suggesting is in terms of total media consumption, it could be up from 12 hours a day to perhaps 13 or 14 hours a
Yeah.
day, which I think has significant ramifications on multiple things. So, the first thing I think it has a ramification on is just health and well being. If you're spending that much time consuming media, and I saw that news media consumption was up 20% last week, you're getting a lot of negative information that probably actually isn't relevant to you and where you're at, unless you're in, New York, Seattle, LA. But if you're sitting in Omaha, Nebraska, the lockdown in New York is in the panic that should be around that probably isn't as relevant to you in Nebraska. So it's stimulating a great deal of just anxiety. And then you combine that with the isolation. And I think you have a recipe for a pretty significant like mental health breakdown. Like mental health and media consumption are weirdly like hand in hand, the types of media people consume and then how long they're on it. So I think, loneliness, anxiety, depression, all of those are going to be increasing fairly rapidly over the next few months. And you see it on the media consumption piece.
Yeah.
There's also been an increase in domestic violence and child abuse, just people being locked up in their homes in toxic environments for long periods of time. So there's going to be an increase in a lot of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
This is producer Nipa, by the way.
Switching roles.
But that's been an interesting conversation and kind of sad because they don't really have an avenue to escape at this point.
Yeah. If you're in a bad situation, you're just now locked into it and it's going to get worse. Yeah. If you're in a good situation, it's probably stable for a longer period of time, but the media consumption, whenever you see media consumption increasing in a time like this, those people aren't watching like educational videos.
Yeah, it actually shows like what goes up. It breaks down what actually rises in those periods of times is app and web on smartphone. Yeah. So that's all news.
That's your 20% news app.
Yeah, that's your 20% news app. And so yeah, I mean try to find something else to watch. I don't know. Like I mean, this is just like we're looking at this data, so it's pretty.
I mean,
It's
the answer is probably the consuming behavior is probably going to. My guess is higher consumption is going to correspond with far more negative outcomes than
mm,
people who use the increased time for productive or creative activities,
yeah,
which require a lot more mental discipline to do. If you're anxious, if you're fearful, you're not going to be in a creative or productive state of mind, but finding ways to put yourself in that state of mind is going to be pretty important if, these quarantines go past 2 weeks.
right.
I think most people have like it. I think most people find it hard. It seems like after 5 days, and then after 2 weeks is the pressure really starts to set in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think the first 5 days is like, okay, this isn't that bad. But as soon as you get towards that second week, you're gonna be like wishing.
Yeah, I think the one of the problems is people at first were seeing this as like, oh, work from home. I'll get to spend time with my dog and in my
Mm-hmm.
pajamas, and it'll be super super fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then what you realize is it's work from home. But then I can't go out with friends.
Right.
Then I can't see my family. And also, like, my kids are here all day. My husband or wife is here all day.
Right.
The house starts to seem pretty small.
Well, then also like, I mean, we're thinking of it from our perspective in Tallahassee, which even where you live in Tallahassee, most likely you can still go
You
outside
have a
and
yard,
walk on the
yeah, or
streets,
a
whatever.
patio.
But if you're in New York City or these bigger areas, metropolitan areas, I mean, you can't go out your building to go walk on the streets of New York City. Like
Yeah.
that's not an option. And I'm assuming all the parks are closed down because I mean, yeah. So I mean, you can't even walk outside. I mean, so you're literally inside until you have to go somewhere very like necessary. So I think I mean, I know we're supposed to cause conflict on here, but I think you're completely right with like people are gonna see an increase in depression and anxiety and because you can't control it. This is like this is like what they call it in like World War II, like the when people get bombed.
So that
It's
World II thing. There
yeah.
was the. You mean shell shock?
Shell shock.
So World War I was shell shock.
Whoa, yeah, okay. World War I was shell shock, and
Yeah.
it's I mean basically it's outside of your control of all these things that are happening.
I
And
mean,
that's
look,
kind of what
yeah,
happening
and
is
one
now.
of the fundamental problems of this is there's no action you can give people to
Yeah.
do that feels like a useful.
Yeah.
Stay home, wash your hands.
I do think the community side that's like the actionable side right now that a lot of people
Yeah,
can
but you
get
have to
around.
avoid the community.
Yeah, but you can still be involved in your community. We're keeping your distance, like helping out elderly people go shopping when, like, if you are healthy, you can go help people
Yeah.
shop. You can plan these times. Like Nipa and I we've talked about stories from Italy that have came out where like whole buildings, like they're nominating like one person to go shopping every day for whole buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, Tallahassee isn't at a situation now, but I mean, New York City and Los Angeles have to be in those areas.
Yeah, at least New York looks pretty bad.
Yeah. Okay.
So, last item is out of Morning Consult, a poll, how human interaction in ads affects purchasing consideration.
Mhm.
And this goes to the thing I was just saying a second ago, Kyle, which is I think the problem with a pandemic like this is it actually frays the community.
Yeah.
And we in like 2020 have embraced this ethos that I can remain connected from a distance and I can just FaceTime you and it's like similar to being together. But like that's not how human psychology works. Despite what we might like to think, like we are out of sight, out of mind creatures. We develop relationships with the things we spend the most time around, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And so the distancing stuff ends up having a long-term effect. And so, there's this poll. Do you think it would be appropriate to show this in an ad? So people shaking hands, 57% inappropriate. People hugging, 55% inappropriate. People kissing, 53% inappropriate. People standing less than 6 feet apart, 33% inappropriate. And then all of those correlate with a less likely to buy services from that person, which means, and we've had clients do this, moving their creatives to showing people at home with their families. I think there is a point where being back in groups becomes aspirational again, and then that's what you want to show. to remind people that, hey, we want to get back to normal. But, right now, if it's inappropriate in your ad to show human to human contact, dude, human to human contact is so important. If like babies don't have it, they literally are mentally handicapped for the rest of their life, emotionally and physically. Like person to person contact is like critical to the way human beings function. And like, can you go weeks or months? Yeah, you can go weeks or months. But like, if this is a long-standing thing, it has permanent impacts on society.
Yeah, and I mean,
not just advertising.
And I think you're right there. But even like, cause the video call stuff, like I had never video called before, and now I've started doing it with like family and friends, just because like even that sight, like of seeing someone else and then just hearing their voice has felt like even just a little bit more connected. At this time.
Till they throttle that bandwidth. You can't do video
you
calls
can't
anymore.
do video calls.
Or it's just like really clunky.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, it brings me back to like. I mean, what I thought would. I don't know. I'm not in a bunch, and maybe Nipa can provide. I think you're in more like Facebook groups than I am. I don't know if you are.
I'm not in a ton of Facebook groups, but I have a lot of family and friends all over the world, and so that's been. In the last few weeks, we've been all reaching out more, contacting people more. I've been connecting with people that I haven't talked to in a few months, just checking in, seeing how they're doing. My family and I are doing group FaceTime every week because we're all over the country in different parts. And so I think the being disconnected in Tallahassee on some level is true, but I am constantly worried about my family in Phoenix and Seattle, like, because we're in places that are highly impacted. And I think that's what we're seeing here is everyone is more globally connected, even from far away. And so that level of empathy I'm seeing has been really nice. But yes, definitely a lot more video chats. I am planning one tonight with my cousin who had to postpone his wedding. We're all doing a group FaceTime with like 30 of us. Wow. We'll see how that goes. I mean, but we're trying to stay connected during this time for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those interesting times in like our civilization where we have these, you can actually be physically separated like by, more than just a mile and more just by corona. You can be physically separated from your communities already. And so like having to bring back this like I want to be involved in this community is interesting to see how people are doing that. Like with Nipa and like my family's not in the same city. And so like we have these communities that actually aren't located in like nearby.
Yeah.
And so seeing how like we're using these tools to kind of connect to those people. But I think you're right. Like the social contact stuff is super important.
My argument would be this is why you've seen like social media use correspond with depression is because it's a simulacrum of social interaction. It isn't actually social interaction.
Right.
Like it's a shadow of the thing that you actually want to have.
Yeah, like you're longing for it, so you use this anyways. Yeah. I'm
starting to wonder how nursing homes are going to handle it because they've shut off all visiting for the last few weeks at this point, most of them. And a lot of the clients in nursing homes and assisted living facilities tend to be on their own. They're isolated already. They get their visitor for a certain amount of time a day. I'm hoping that there's some plan in place to help them through this, but I can already see it. I have family who has people in assisted living facilities that don't even speak English and don't eat the food. So like it's a huge shock for them to not get visitors on a daily basis in person. And they might do FaceTime, but I don't know how much access they have to that, right? Like, and it's, it's not going to be the same for them.
Yeah.
For them, that in-person contact is very important.
Yeah. It's what they've known their whole lives. I'm sure Facebook would love to donate a bunch of Facebook portals to all those people as well.
I mean, Facebook did put together, I think it said $100 million small business fund.
Yeah.
Look, I think you're going to see the tech companies
really take advantage of this
go
PR
on the
stuff.
PR bonanza, right? Because they're sitting on piles and piles of cash.
Yeah.
They're smart enough to realize that, like, even if the economy doesn't recover, they're still the best off. And the thing they need to fix, like they could fix pretty quickly by just getting the good PR during the crisis and then come back out of it, and then people don't feel negative about them, and then they're off the hook on any of the regulatory stuff that they want to be off of.
Yeah, and I mean, like and they're all the things we're talking about right now. Like the things we're talking about, people are seeking out is like this human connection. They are all the middlemen of these things. So all you gotta do is make the ads they're already making.
Yeah.
And double down on that PR stuff. And I mean, I think that is correct. I think we'll be looking like after we come out of COVID and whatever time period, we'll be looking at like these companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, all these companies will be like, oh, remember when they like let us still connect with people and get our stuff?
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, those people are great. Like, I don't even care if they have my information anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. It'll be like a privacy.
Yeah. I mean, look, man,
thing.
This is, a rough equivalent to 9/11, and you were probably too young to remember too much pre and post 9/11. But like one of the issues with the crisis is what people will accept dramatically expands. The window of what you will tolerate goes way, way wider.
Yep. Yeah, I've read a bunch of stuff about that. The privacy, basically, like that's when all of the privacy was shut down right then. All right. Well, we're past 30 minutes, so
I guess we gotta go.
We're doing too many dailies to stay long now. Keep looking out for the daily. We're calling them the dailies. We can just call them dailies. Look out for the dailies that we're putting up every day. And so if you guys have something you think we should talk about, maybe email or hit us up in our comments, and we'll think about things we can talk about. So until next time, stay safe, wash your hands. Adios.
Goodbye.